Welcome back. In Ottawa, we're always ready for a federal election campaign, but the NDP have a good hunch that one could start in less than a month. In a letter to NDP candidates and campaign teams that was obtained by CTV News, National Campaign Director Jennifer Howard writes, in part, Donald Trump's continued threats to our sovereignty and to Canadian workers need a strong, united and immediate response. Nonetheless, Parliament stands prorogued, and no Liberal leadership candidate, including Mr. Carney, has reached out to any opposition leaders to discuss emergency legislation coming to Parliament to deal with Donald Trump's trade war and the impact on Canadians. She continues, we believe the rumors of Mr. Carney calling a snap election are credible, adding, the Liberals believe that they can turn this crisis into a political benefit for them. I'm asking all campaigns to be prepared for an election call to come as early as March 10th. Here's Mark Carney's response.
You know, you never take a decision before you need to take a decision. And so nothing is pre-wired. Let's see what the situation is in the middle of March and do what is best for Canadians. And the government will do what's best for Canadians. If Parliament needs to be recalled for certain reasons, it will be. If it makes sense to get a strong mandate at that point, that is what will follow.
So just how likely is a snap call? Let's bring back our front bench. Michelle Cardario, Gary Marr, Tom Mulcair, and Rob Benzie. Michelle, I'm going to start with you. I mean, let's just point out, that's not a no from Mark Carney.
Well, of course not. First of all, he's got the small, thing of just winning the leadership race, too. So it would be unbelievably arrogant to get it too ahead of himself. And also, it would be kind of dumb to actually, cut off one of your options before you've even got the job or actually been sworn in. So, and I think there's so much uncertainty. We don't know what Mr. Trump is going to do. It's quite something that the NDP are upset that they haven't gotten a call about bringing forward legislation, as I think that they actually want to bring the Liberals down anyways and go into an election at first opportunity is the last that I heard from that leader. So one would think that they're already getting, some kind of election footing if their intention was to do so at the end of March. And in most seriousness, we don't know what Mr. Trump is bringing in. So we don't know what the legislation would be for response. And until we do know, then, the government can't prepare it and bring the House back. So, I think that all parties, quite rightly, are probably getting on election footing. All parties have seen, except for the Liberals, have been calling for an election for a number of months now, and the Conservatives for even longer than that. Narrowing polls, right circumstance, in ordinary times without Mr. Trump as a trigger, I think that going early would be very much on the table. So there's going to be a lot to talk about over the next month and a half anyways.
Yeah, and Tom, it's interesting because we did talk about some of those polls earlier this week that do show, the Leger poll particularly, showing that if Carney is the leader of the Liberals, that he's at a dead heat with Pierre Poilievre. But I wonder whether or not you think, this is something that, of course, CTV News obtained, but these types of memos don't get out by mistake. Do you think Jennifer Howard is being prudent here, or do you think that she, really is onto something?
Well, first of all, from all the people who've worked with her since I left, nobody has anything but good things to say about Jennifer Howard. She's top notch. She was a former minister in Manitoba. She's she's at the top of her game, and she's in the right place. I can share with you that on the French media, I do a lot of French television, radio, and write in one of the major French paper. People are taking the 14th, 15th of March as pretty well the date when this thing's going to be called, and everybody is assuming that Mark Carney is going to win this thing. So is that going to come to pass? I'm very conscious that Michelle was absolutely spot on. You've got to be very careful as you answer that question, not to give the impression that you think that this thing is already decided, but we can assume that it's almost decided. And I think that that Carney was careful, because the way things have been going, it might be necessary to have a mandate from Parliament. But one of the reasons why they want to go early is that Mark Carney's not in Parliament. He doesn't have a seat. And so there's the big issue of the mandate, which is the thing that he talked about. There are a lot of other things, that move you towards the conclusion that the Liberals want to go as quickly as possible. And, one of them is as prosaic as the fact that To get the House back in, you need a throne speech. And if you really want to get 8 million Canadians who have French as their first language angry, put in a governor general who a few years in, still can't deliver a speech in French. And I know it sounds like, irrelevant to a whole bunch of people, but it's the type of thing, Carney and the Liberals have been tailoring their messages. They've been doing very well. He is super well liked in Quebec. But all of a sudden, Mary Simon would have a role in that election that I don't think anybody wants. And so I think that there's a whole bunch of big and small reasons why the Liberals are just going to want to go as soon as possible. The big decision for them is short campaign or long campaign. I remember Harper decided a long campaign was in his favor against Justin Trudeau in 2015. He was dead wrong. His assumption was the more Canadians saw Trudeau, the more they would find him inadequate. Turned out that he was okay, gets through the first couple of debates, and people start saying, he's not as bad as you said he was. So it worked out in Trudeau's favor. Is it going to be the same thing with Poilievre, or do you give Poilievre a bit more time? Because I do know him. I spent 10 years across from him in Parliament. He's a very irascible character who can say very unpredictable things. And so that's going to be the big debate amongst the Liberals, I think. But I think the rest of it is pretty well. As for the date that it's called, I think we're looking mid-March, pretty safe, before St. Paddy's Day.
Yeah, I'll write that one down and hold you to it, frankly. But Gary, do you think that also maybe Mark Carney's looking at this as maybe the leadership bump that could carry him through it and carry that into a campaign?
Well, it's hard to say. I mean, I was actually thinking about back in, when Kim Campbell was first elected leader of the Progressive Conservative Party. My recollection is that around the time of July, the Canada Day weekend, she was actually much more popular than Jean Chrétien. But as time went on, it just got worse and worse and worse. And of course, we know that the Conservatives went down to ending up with just 2 seats, Jean Charest and Elsie Wayne. So I think if it is indeed Mr. Carney that becomes the leader of the party, I think it would probably be in his best interest to take advantage of the recency effect and the warmth and the attention that he's gotten during the leadership and try and convert that into electoral success. I think Mr. Poilievre will. We've seen him already shift from his Trudeau-Singh cabal to now talking about Mr. Carney being really the consummate insider with the current government of Canada, the Liberal Party, and we'll see if that lasts. But I think the longer that you give Mr. Poilievre the opportunity to make that connection, the harder it will be for you as the leader of the Liberal Party to succeed in a general election.
Yeah, Robin, it's interesting because you add to that the fact that in the most populous province, they will have just come out of an election here in Ontario, and that's a strain on volunteers and campaign resources as well.
Yeah, and it's been cold and snowy in Ontario, and that's not much fun to try for candidates or volunteers or voters to go out in the snow. Do they want to go out in March? But I think Tom's onto something. Beware the Ides of March. The only thing is, Mark Carney is a central bank governor, so he is by nature risk averse in the sense that he is a very canny, careful, cautious man. But if the getting looks as good as it's going to get, then you'd be smart to maybe pounce. I mean, Mike, you and I talked about this on the radio earlier today. Here you have the situation where the just inflation gone because Justin Trudeau is gone. The carbon tax, it's effectively gone with whoever wins the Liberal leadership. Apparently, you have Canada is broken. That narrative just can't sell anymore. You can't. The flag waving is not now convoy protesters with F Trudeau signs. The flag waving is now people worried about Donald Trump and a 51st state push from here in Washington. So I think if you're Mark Carney and that Leger poll is very, very telling, and Leger is one of the best pollsters in the country, and if they're saying that he's strongest against Trump according to voters, if voters feel he's stronger against Trump than Poilievre. And I think, frankly, that would be the sense here in Washington. I think that they know who Mark Carney is. They don't know Pierre Poilievre. He's a lifelong politician from Ottawa. They know a central bank governor of 2 G7 countries. I don't think there's anyone in the history of the world who's been a central bank governor of 2 G7 countries.
Yeah, unfortunately, we got to leave it right there. Thanks to everybody on the front bench.